Hi there, this is Matt with State of Phlox here with a top 10 episode of Star Trek Enterprise, or Enterprise as it was originally discussed. I'm going to give you the top 10, starting with 10 and working my way down to the best episode of the series. Talking about the episodes a little bit in between. Now, picking 10 episodes for Enterprise was a little harder than I was expecting, not because there were so many great ones, because picking out 10 that were like genuinely phenomenally stand out that I can talk about was a little harder than it had been with certainly the original series or even Next Generation. So, we're going to start in the number 10 spot. We have Dead Stop. This is an episode that I really like from the second season of the show. I believe it was the fourth episode of the second season where they sort of discover a space station that is willing to help them out in exchange for other things. And one of the characters on board gets killed. There's weird things happening left and right, and this felt very similar to an early episode of Next Generation, or more specifically, an original series show. It had those strong science fiction vibes. You don't know what's going on, there's mystery, there's intrigue, and where that story ultimately ends up is really quite interesting. Criticism of these kind of episodes, though, is we never revisit them. It really bothers me, especially like you'd think because it's in Enterprise it would be touched on eventually later, or it's weird that we haven't heard about this place. That seems kind of strange. But that's my criticism for all Star Trek one-off random episodes like this. I think I even parroted the exact same thing in my Doomsday Machine discussion in episode, or the original series countdown. Anyway, I digress. Dead Stop is a very good episode. In my 9 place, we have the In a Mirror Darkly two-parter. I really like this out of season 4. It takes the Enterprise crew into the future. It doesn't take them into the future, actually. The future comes to their past, where you get to see how they interact with modern technology and how this dark mirror universe affects even these characters. Characters that I really like that don't generally have a ton of screen time, like Sato, has far more, and that's always fun. As did Phlox. Phlox had some interesting stuff to do. I really like what they did with T'Pol. In a Mirror Darkly is really fun. Seeing the crew in the original series uniforms was fun. And just revisiting the sets of the original series was so damn cool. I loved it. That also has some really cool action beats with the Gorn. They did a lot of work to make this one really soar. In my number 8 spot, we have These Are the Voyages. Now, I'm going to stop right here and recognize that you're probably pissed off that this made my list, but I will say this. This would make my list also on my top 10 worst episodes of the list, because I think half of the episode is fantastic and the other half isn't. I actually like all the stuff they do with the Enterprise crew. I think it's very neat, and it's very creative, and it is an effective goodbye to the Next Generation branding of the Star Trek. This kind of acts like the epilogue of Return of the King. Everybody complains that there are too many endings. Well, it's not just an ending to one movie, it's an ending to 3 movies. This is not just an ending for Enterprise. Hell, it's hardly even an ending for Enterprise. It's honestly an ending for everything that has come since Next Generation. It is them saying goodbye, the creative forces saying goodbye to these characters, to this world. I don't love the stuff that we have with Riker trying to decide if he's going to tell Picard about everything we know he already does in Pegasus from Next Generation. However, I do like how he uses the holodeck I think it is the best use ever of the holodeck. I'm not a fan of like the Sherlock Moriarty episodes that a lot of people seem to like. I don't like those at all. However, I love the concept of the holodeck, and I think it's best utilized in this episode of all episodes. So that's where it kind of gets a pass for me, and I like what they do with the Enterprise crew. I like the sacrifice that Trip makes. It kind of sucks that he dies off screen. Spoiler alert, Trip dies. but it's an earned moment to me, and I liked how that affects to Paul and Archer, and their conversation afterwards is really quite effective. It works for me. I like the episode. Come at me. In my number 7 spot is the Augment trilogy, the highlight being Cold Station 13, is it? Starting with Boarderlands, that's the middle episode, and the final episode is the Augments. That trilogy that kind of has connective tissue to the Khan storyline of these eugenics wars survivors, and how Dr. Soong sort of releases them and then realizes that maybe robotics are better, and an interesting villain turn from Brent Spinner. All of that stuff worked for me. I liked it. It is a little pandering to the audience, but hey, that's kind of what Enterprise did a lot. In my number 6 spot is Similitude. Now, this one and the one in my number 5 spot are genuinely interchangeable because they're hitting on a lot of the same story ideas. But in Similitude, we have a mortally wounded Trip, and they have technology to grow their own new Trip to harvest for organs to save the Trip that they know. Not realizing that this new Trip would come with his own set of memories and stuff like that, and knowledge and experiences that are incorporated with that of the old Trip. And it becomes this really interesting exploration of cloning that I think is often not explored at any intellectual level. I think this is my favorite use of cloning as a like moral quandary, next to like maybe the original Jurassic Park book and film that I've ever seen. Similitude is very strong with that, and you see kind of a whole life span in a 45-minute set, and it's really good. I like this episode a lot, and its ties with the characters and how this Trip is interacting with Paul and Archer and stuff like that. It's fascinating, genuinely so. My number 5 spot is Twilight. This kind of has Archer flitting through time in different increments after being hit with like this sonic wave that alters his consciousness, and how his relationship with these people when he comes back to consciousness as he's aging progressively and the war with the Xindi is losing gets utilized. It's very interesting, compelling storytelling. My only criticism of this episode genuinely is, because I think it does great character work across the board, is it seems to be stemming from a season 1 idea that maybe Archer and T'Pol are the romantic keystone to the series rather than T'Pol and Trip, and how that T'Pol's relationship with Archer in this episode is very unusual, because I think that was one of the things I talked about doing the entire series rundown for Enterprise, was that they gender swapped Spock to create T'Pol, but they wanted to maximize the relationship between Spock and Kirk and kind of find a way to ship them in a PC means, like the no homo kind of way, which is its own series of issues. However, they discovered that the actors playing Trip and T'Pol had far more chemistry than T'Pol did to Scott Bakula's Archer. So by midway through season 1 or even season 2, you can tell that that's going to be the romantic relationship story built. You just can tell that. And this seems to be stemming from an early episode ideal that maybe she will end up with Archer. That said, it is a great episode, very interesting sci-fi. This is similar to Inner Light. This is kind of like the Inner Light for Star Trek Enterprise, but it worked for me quite well. Number 4 is Shuttlepod 1. What happens when Malcolm and Trip are stuck inside this shuttlepod with no chance of survival, no hope of escape. and it is a compelling episode, and I almost wish we had just kept it bottle episode style into that shuttle with only those two characters, but we keep flitting back to the Enterprise crew and how are they working to save them. We don't need to see that side. I think what's more interesting is these two characters who are at odds become chummy, at odds chummy, and it's fascinating. It's good acting, especially like both of them. That's the highlight of their performances. They are great in Shuttlepod 1. It's a season 1 episode that I urge you to watch. We have in our third place spot Carbon Creek. Now this is a lot of people's favorite episode of the show, and I get it. This is kind of playing with the first time the Vulcans ever came to Earth, and we have Enterprise's go at City on the Edge of Forever, where we find out that T'Pol may have had an ancestor that had landed on Earth in the 1950s, and how that relationship with humans was fostered even from an earlier point. Now, this completely interrupts any kind of canon established with Star Trek, what we know about the Vulcans, when first contact was established, all this kind of stuff. But it's ambiguous as to whether or not this happened. Now, I really, truly, genuinely wish the final shot of this episode was not in there and the ambiguity was left in place, but Carbon Creek is a great drama that feels incredibly evocative of the original series and is one of the strongest episodes of Star Trek, period. I love this episode, and not how it connects in any other ways, as just a good piece of sci-fi storytelling. Number 2 is Regeneration. Now this one is on here because of how it influences how we see Star Trek moments that come later, but this is the first contact with the Borg, and this was back in season 1 and 2 when they were like firm in establishing how origin stories of these alien beings kind of came to be, and this is ours for the Borg. It works though. I think it is a thrilling episode, absolutely engaging, a genuine nail-biter, some great action, but also strong story beats. Great stuff going on with Phlox. I highly recommend this episode, especially if you're a Borg fan, which I'm kind of cooler on than most people, but if you're a Borg fan, this is one of the best Borg episodes. I would rather watch this than Best of Both Worlds. Most of you people will come at me for that, but it's okay. I'm assuming you're already going to come after me for these are the Voyages thumbs up. But now down to my all-time favorite episode of Star Trek Enterprise, and that is in the number 1 spot, Strange New World. This was one of the very first episodes of the series, but I think it is a great one. It has a lot of mystery. It's genuinely spooky at times because you don't know what's happening, what's real, and what's not. The crew of the Enterprise lands on a strange new world where there's a sudden storm that takes hold and stranding the people on the planet. And you have the people in the ship and the people on the planet, and they're reporting back to each other, but the people on the planet are beginning to see terrible monsters emerging from the rock walls. And it is a really good episode. I kind of include this episode whenever I do like a Halloween countdown of television shows, even though this isn't strictly Halloween. It's a spooky episode, and who doesn't love spooky Star Trek? It's rare when it happens, but this is the best example of it. It is good writing all the way across the board and gives us our first great interactions, genuinely fantastic interactions between Trip and T'Pol. I loved it. This is my favorite episode of the series, and it depresses me to know that a lot of people aren't as on board with this episode as I am. But I digress. It's fantastic. Check it out. What are your top 10 episodes? What do you think of my ranking? It's okay. You can come at me. These are the Voyages. I know. But that said, next week I hope to have a review for J.J. Abrams' Star Trek. So that should be a fun discussion to have. Until then, thanks for watching, like, subscribe, do all that good stuff, and peace.